I want to follow on with what Rich just said. The downgrade in India's growth forecast has been pretty extreme. It's down to 6.1%. Back at the beginning of the year was seen as 8.2, but still one of the fastest growing economies in the world. IMF says still a bright spot. Can it remain a bright spot if these growing pressures on the global economy push this global economy into recession? What does that mean for India?
Well, thanks for having me. Indeed, we have downgraded the India growth for this year, but to 6.8%. 6.1% is what we are projecting for the next fiscal year. So for FY 22-23, we are looking at 6.8%. This is down from 7.4% in July. And the main reason is the external headwinds, the tightened global financial conditions, mostly driven by tightened monetary policy in advanced economies, by the Fed mostly, but also the continued fallout from the war in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia, which have driven up commodity prices and weakened global demand. So these are the headwinds that India is facing and that have, driven us to reduce growth to 6.8% in the current fiscal year.
And the other side of this coin, I guess, growth and inflation. The inflation rate hit 7.4% in September. Food prices, definitely a big driver there, well above the RBI's 2 to 6% target, though. For the Reserve Bank of India, what does this mean? A 50 basis point hike at this point, or maybe a not so aggressive because they think these food prices are going to come off?
Well, that's right. Inflation increased to 7.4% in September. We had seen this coming because food prices were increasing in September. Food price inflation has been a challenge and has complicated the task of the RBI to bring inflation down below the upper level of the tolerance band. So if you look at the consumer basket today, about 25% of that basket is constituted of food and beverages, which have been increasing at above 6% so far this year. So that's the challenge. But another 20% of the basket is non-food, non-fuel, which has also been increasing at above 6%. So the RBI is addressing the issue. They have raised interest rates so far. We have seen 190 basis points increase in interest rates so far this year. And we expect more to come. More needs to be done to bring it down. We do expect inflation to start coming down next year. We are looking at 5.1% average inflation for the next fiscal year, FY 23-24.
Well, the IMF is warning that aggressive central bank rate hikes around the world are hitting the emerging market nations developing very hard. And certainly it's been an issue for the rupee. How is that going to play out? And what are the appropriate steps for the Indian government to take?
We have seen indeed, currencies all around the world depreciate, both in advanced economies and emerging markets, because of the very strong dollar driven by aggressive interest rate increases in the Fed. In this circumstance, given the external shock, given the external commodity price shock as well, we would expect currencies to depreciate. This is the right response to let the currency depreciate. So we have seen the rupee depreciate by about 10% so far this year. The RBI has also intervened to counter excessive volatility in markets. We have seen foreign exchange reserves decline, but the RBI is still sitting on a large stash of foreign exchange reserves, and we think that the external position is still quite comfortable.
How much room does the RBI have on rates? I mean, how much can they go without sacrificing growth too much? Or India itself is structurally perhaps, how much efficacy does monetary policy have overall?
That's a very good question. I mean, there is a sacrifice ratio here. You need to raise rates to contract demand and fight inflation that is driven by demand, but you also need to take care of your economy. The economy has recovered pretty well from COVID, but we still see a slight negative output gap. And more importantly, if you look at different sectors, some have come back more than fully, but others are still, coming back from COVID. So it's a calibration exercise. You have to balance growth and inflation objectives at the same time.
Nada, what about the efficacy part of my question?
Well, the RBI has been, increasing policy rate steadily and effectively this year, and we do expect that to feed through the economy and start bringing inflation down starting next year.
Okay, Nada, if we look ahead, what's more of a concern for India in the future? Would it be a global recession or sticky prices?
Well, the headwinds facing India's economy are significant. As I mentioned, there is the global financial conditions that are tightening significantly, and we see more of that to come. What looks like, the tighter global financial conditions and the tighter monetary policy by the Fed we still see more to come from that. The war in Ukraine and sanctions on Russia, we don't see an end to that anytime soon. So that's a big, looming clouds on the horizon. These are issues of concern to us for India's growth.